All right, so let's get into it. Moving to Africa for love. Well, I just want to start off by saying that I advocate for Black love, right? My Blackness is a part of who I am. It's a part of the fact that I was born into society that told me I was Black first. I recognize that I am now in a place that Blackness is something that is just, it just is. And so I can just be without being in my Blackness. But for people that are watching this from all around the world, I make it very clear, and I want it to be very clear, that I am about the restoration, the preservation of the Black family. And thus, for me, Black love is at the center of that. Okay, so let's start there. Now, welcome to the channel if you're new. My name is Ashley. On my channel, Ashley in Africa, I speak about my experience moving, living, and doing business here on the continent. I share my experience of love, motherhood, and entrepreneurship. And I'm also the creator of Africa Investors Academy, a community of entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and investors that are building their business, growing their business, and investing in projects here on the continent of Africa. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. I am currently in South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa, to be exact, in this beautiful garden outside of our short-term homestay. But our new home, the garden is so bomb. It's so bomb. But yeah, I watch content here on these YouTube streets. And there's not enough of us as women talking about the pursuit of love, right? Or the acceptance of love, right? Because we are in turn not the pursuers. But I will say that the pursuit of self-love happened to me prior to moving to the continent, but it was fortified with me being in a place where I represented the majority, where I could speak an indigenous tongue, where I was eating indigenous food, where I am learning to practice indigenous cultural and religious, spiritual practices, right? And in that pursuit of love, I was also able to put myself in an environment where I could now attract that love. And so the reality is, I'm sure if I went back to the US, I am going to attract the type of men that find the values that I stand on, that I embody, the energy that I emit to be attractive, right? I've never had an issue in the US with attracting men. I think the challenge for me was that my life wasn't in alignment with my values. And so I was attracting the in alignmentness, right? I was attracting people based on um my inability to project those type of boundaries, those type of values, that type of, those type of qualities that, ultimately that I wanted in my life, because I wasn't exhibiting them myself, right? And so I think, what is happening in the US is so much. It's so much. For me, at this point in a time, it is all about the safety. It is about the radicalization of, these white supremacists, the radicalization of people that are against this community of people that are Black and brown, but specifically brown, meaning, I'm brown, Black, and African descent. Right. So let me be very clear. The people that are of African descent, whether or not they decide that they want to be indigenous this week, this month, this year, those that are the descendants of slaves in America are and have been under attack for centuries. And what does that look like? Attack on our families, attack on our men, attack on our children, attack on our women. And so while I do know that I have some friends that are in, I can count on one hand though, that are in these healthy relationships. We always hear them talk about when they take vacations, how they reconnect closer. When they move to Africa, they reconnect closer. Why? Because the environment fortifies this level of self-love, this awareness of self, a deeper connection with our truest innate need to be loved and to feel love. And so I'm an advocate, right? I am an advocate for removing yourself from an environment that is creating dysfunction around your life, your family, your friendships, your mental health, your financial stability, right? Like, I'm an advocate. How do you continue to operate in a system that you see is not necessarily fortifying that, right? They're not showing Black love on television and the way in which we need it to continue out Black families, right? They're not showing that in our music, right? It is very much just being positioned and being sold to us in a way that's destructive. So my light went out, y'all, but we gonna keep rocking. So how do you do this? Right? How do you do this? And I owe this to a woman who has been somewhat of a virtual mentor, who has also supported me in my journey of, sharing content on YouTube, who has allowed me to speak to her audience multiple times, Stephanie Perry. And she really gave it, like put it on paper, right? For me, as I mentioned, environment was a big thing. So remove myself from an environment that is not creating sustainability for the things that I desire in my life, the Black family, right? So that's number one. Number two, where could I go that had the same type of values that I myself had? Black family, spirituality, close to culture, right? There is this debate about Black culture in America. What culture do we have? And yeah, our culture in America, quite frankly, is rooted in consumption today, right? Did it start that way? No. But I'd say prior to that, it was rooted in survival, right? The Black family at one point was a thing. And yes, it still exists in pockets, right? It does. It still exists in pockets. And my optimism is always going to lead that where I see it. But for me, in my immediate environment, it wasn't available. It wasn't present, right? And so I sought it out. Those values of the family, of culture rooted in indigenous practices, food that is rooted in indigenous practices and plants and vegetables and fruits readily available. Spirituality, right? Where you are connecting with ancestors, connecting with the entities and the bodies and the natural, the waterfalls and the lakes and the oceans and the mountains and like that is where we come from, right? So those type of values had to be a part of the society in which that I went to. The next thing was demographics, right? So this is the part that Stephanie really asserted, and she talks about, okay, well, what is the population like? How many men are there? How many of them are, of African descent? For me, right? I'm speaking now for me. How many of them are in an income bracket in which they are not only providing for themselves and their families, but they are also enriching the community around them, right? And you can't do that if you're barely making ends meet, right? So where are the men that are in this type of space where they are earning an income that reflects their ability to be able to provide for themselves, their families, and their community? Men, this is what women are looking for. Women of a higher, awareness, right? And a level about themselves that is valuable. Okay, just saying. Where are the men that may be unmarried, right? Or they may be divorced, right? Is this a culture that allows and accepts divorce? Having lived in East Africa and Tanzania, where that really wasn't a big social practice, it was and is still extremely taboo. Um, it doesn't mean that you don't have extramarital affairs just because you don't have divorce, right? But as an institution, it's widely unaccepted. So, as a man that's entering into a relationship after a significant relationship of a marriage, they may or may not be divorced, you know? Like, so I think, and again, I value the institution of marriage. I don't celebrate divorce. And in fact, people that go through divorces, they don't celebrate that. They don't want that. It's not something that they went into marriage, experiencing and saying, hey, we can always do this. So it's not anything to praise. It's just the reality of a society that will allow for that type of person who maybe did get into a relationship too early before they really knew themselves or their values or knew the right questions to ask or hadn't done the proper healing work of their trauma, and thus the relationship didn't last. But where, for me, is that a is that an environment where, you know, it's not taboo, it happens, but you have people that are making the decision to end the relationship to then do their work, hopefully, to then go into another relationship, right? And then, lifestyle. So matching it up properly with the things that are important to me, what type of lifestyle do I want to live? You know? So, funny story, not really funny, but just my experience. Um, in Tanzania, I was dating a man and he was a great guy, is a great guy. So loving, so compassionate, empathetic, very transparent, all of the things. Um, there were some other things there too, but I'd say really for me, the qualifier was lifestyle. So, um, you know, he traveled a lot and didn't always find it necessary to have me on those trips, right? So there was that. Um, just felt that, your job is to be with the children. And I agree. And I also think that I personally love to accompany my man on work trips, personal trips, couples trips, whatever. I like trips. I like to travel. I like adventure. And I also love being around my kids, right? So it's not a this or that. And I think there was another moment where we were talking about money and we talked about what it would take for me to feel comfortable. And he talked about, well, because oftentimes in Africa, if you own a home, you own it. There is no mortgage. You might pay $100 tax a year, but for the most part, you own it. You have no bills other than your electricity, your Wi-Fi, and water, right? And so he was asking me, or telling me rather, oh yeah, you live in the house, you have 1,000,000 T shilling a month, like that's a good life. Well, 1,000,000 T shilling is a little bit under $500. Um, and for me, I was just like, oh, 1,000,000. I personally don't necessarily need what I was making before, which was $10,000 a month, plus more than that, 18,000 a month. No, I don't need that. But $500 a month, I need a little more. I need about 5 million, you know, 6, 7 million, to be comfortable, right? Like, and maybe even if my rent's paid, all of those things, okay, maybe, but I need a little bit more than that. I'm just saying. So ultimately, lifestyle came down to where, He just couldn't understand. He was just like, what? Like, that's a lot. Like, and it is. It is. And I recognize that it is. And I live in this life of abundance, and that everything that I want and desire comes to me frequently and through multiple sources in an increasing amount all the time. That is the life that I live. And so our lifestyles did not match up. So I needed to be somewhere where I could also connect with a person that lived in that lifestyle. So it was a combination, like I said, of all of the things: environment, where values were matched, where my lifestyle could be matched, and ultimately the type of man who fit a certain life experience could also be matched for me. And again, I'm not saying that this man isn't in America, he isn't in the UK, but it's too cold there, it's too violent there. And my lifestyle just allows me and has afforded me, and my values of adventure, seeking something a bit more culturally connected to myself. Like, those are my values, and I don't apologize for them. They may not be your values, right? So understanding and knowing your values and what is important for your lifestyle and the type of environment that you want to be in should play a role in the type of relationship and the type of love that you are looking to attract into your life. And so for me, that's here on the continent of Africa. And I have and will continue to attract loving and supportive relationships into my life. One, because I set those intentions, but also because I'm now in an environment that is closely reflected to the values, the lifestyle, and the environment that I want to be in. Right. So I hope that made sense. I hope that it was helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, please like it and share it with someone else who would find value in it as well. And until the next video, I'll see you soon.